On the night of October 26, 2009, a 19-year-old female university student in Shirmane Prefecture, Japan, vanished without a trace on her way back to her dorm. A few days later, parts of her dismembered body were discovered in a remote rural area. In an effort to crack the case, Japanese police deployed a total of more than 310,000 officers, distributed countless missing person flyers, and even set up a dedicated reward fund of 3 million yen. Yet, the case still became a baffling mystery. 7 years later, the Japanese police finally identified the killer. But to everyone's shock, the murderer had died just days after the young woman was killed, and his death was shrouded in eerie mystery. Shirmane Prefecture, located in the southwest of Japan, is home to numerous hot springs, mountains, and valleys, making it a popular tourist destination. Yet, in this picturesque setting, a chilling crime took place. On October 27, 2009, a phone rang urgently in one household. "Hello, is this the family of Miyako Hiroka? She didn't show up for work today. She was on the night shift yesterday, and we didn't hear anything about her taking leave. We've been unable to reach her. Do you know what's going on?" The caller was speaking to the mother of 19-year-old Miyako Hiroka, a first-year university student in Shirmane Prefecture. To save money for a short-term study abroad program, Miyako worked part-time at an ice cream shop near her university. After receiving the call, her mother immediately phoned Miyako's dorm. Her dorm mate said Miyako never came back the previous night, and her phone had been switched off the whole time. Sensing something was terribly wrong, her mother went straight to the police. When the police received the report, they obtained the security footage from the ice cream shop on the day Miyako disappeared. The footage showed that at 9:16 p.m. on October 26, Miyako, wearing a black and white striped top and carrying a bag in her hand, walked out of the store. At the time she left, there was no one beside her. From this, police deduced she must have gone missing on her way back from the shop to her dorm. Together with Miyako's family, police posted numerous missing person flyers across Shirmane Prefecture and reached out via the internet and media, hoping witnesses might come forward with information. But the search notices seemed to vanish into thin air. There was no news at all. The police then decided to investigate the route Miyako took after work. According to her mother's description, Miyako was petite, only 147 centimeters tall. The ice cream shop where she worked was located inside a shopping center, about 2 kilometers from her dorm. From the shop to the dorm, there were 2 possible routes. One option was to take the bus. However, she would first have to walk to the bus stop in downtown Hamada, then transfer onto a bus, a rather troublesome route. The other option was a shorter path that saved time and didn't require waiting for public transport. But this shortcut was extremely remote, cutting through a wooded area. Even during the day, very few people used it, let alone at night. Still, due to her petite stature and desire to save both time and bus fare, Miyako always took this shortcut home after work. Before October 26, 2009, she had always walked it with a coworker. But that day, the coworker had to take the day off for personal reasons. This meant Miyako had to walk home alone. Perhaps because nothing had ever happened during the many times she walked this path with company, she decided to muster the courage and take the deserted shortcut by herself. But she never made it back. She disappeared without a trace. When police examined the path Miyako would have taken, they found it had only a few scattered streetlights and no surveillance cameras along the way. Hardly anyone passed through at night. This made solving the case far more difficult, and the investigation quickly hit a dead end. Then, on November 6, 2009, a major breakthrough came. In the Nishichigoku Mountains Quasi-National Park in Hiroshima Prefecture stands Mount Wulong, rising 1,200 meters above sea level. Its scenery is stunning, with abundant springs and a variety of wild mushrooms, a spot that often attracts visitors. That day, a man foraging for mushrooms at the foot of the mountain noticed a strange mound beneath a pile of fallen leaves. When he brushed the leaves aside, he was horrified to find a woman's severed head buried beneath them. The man immediately called the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they found only the head, no other parts of the body. They quickly expanded the search area, centering it on where the head had been discovered. The next day, November 7th, police found part of the victim's left thigh in a patch of shrubs near the entrance to a forest path. On November 8th, near the spot where the head had been found, they discovered a torso with all 4 limbs missing. The body was completely naked, and no personal belongings were found that could confirm the victim's identity. Then, on November 9th, another portion of the victim's left leg was recovered. On November 19th, human fingernails were found in animal droppings near the forest road. DNA analysis confirmed that all the recovered body parts belonged to the same person. Through missing person records, investigators identified the victim as 19-year-old university student Miyako Hiroka, who had gone missing on October 26 in neighboring Shermaine Prefecture. With this discovery, the missing person case was officially reclassified as a murder investigation. From that point on, Shermaine police intensified their efforts to solve the case. According to the coroner's report, Miyako's death occurred sometime between October 26 and October 31. The body showed multiple signs of trauma from external force, indicating she may have been tortured before death. There were burn marks on the lower part of the torso, likely an attempt by the killer to destroy DNA evidence after sexual assault. Even more disturbing, her internal organs had been removed, and her reproductive organs were missing. The most chilling detail was the evidence that flesh from the inside of her thigh had been sliced off, leading police to suspect the murderer might have engaged in cannibalism. When these horrific details were made public, fear swept through the community. Because the crime scene was so close to the university, parents urged their children not to stay out late at night, and certainly not to take remote paths. Shermaine Prefectural University even moved its dorm curfew from 11:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Residents in other parts of Japan were also deeply concerned. What if this deranged killer fled to another area to strike again? The case became a constant fixture in Japanese media, and under mounting public pressure, police were desperate to crack it as soon as possible. At first, police conducted a detailed investigation into Miyako Hiroka's personal relationships, trying to determine whether she might have offended someone or become involved with suspicious individuals, leading to her tragic fate. However, Miyako's mother, teachers, and classmates all told police that she had only just started university and had a very simple social circle. Apart from attending classes, she spent her free time working part-time at the ice cream shop. She was friendly and easy to get along with, and had no known conflicts with anyone. She was also highly motivated. Not long after entering university, Miyako applied for a short-term exchange program at the Marine State University of Russia. In addition to working part-time, she was diligently improving her English skills, and she successfully passed the program's screening process. Aware that studying abroad would significantly increase her expenses, she took the initiative to work at the ice cream shop to ease the financial burden on her parents. The investigation into her personal connections yielded no breakthroughs. Police then tried to obtain the killer's DNA from the dismembered remains. But the perpetrator appeared to have a strong sense of counter-surveillance and left behind no usable forensic evidence. The only trace found on Miyako's remains were small fragments of material. Testing revealed they were made from packaging used for telephone directories. This type of packaging, however, was extremely common and sold in many places, making it impossible to track down the purchaser. Police then shifted their focus to locating eyewitnesses. One man living near Mount Wulong told investigators that for a period of time, he often saw a white car driving along that road around 9 p.m. But after a while, the car stopped appearing. Investigators suspected that this white car was very likely driven by the killer, who may have used it to transport and discard the victim's dismembered remains at Mount Wulong night after night. So, police retrieved surveillance footage from around Mount Wulong. However, there were very few cameras in the area, and they ultimately failed to capture the suspicious vehicle. With no useful leads from the discovery site at Mount Wulong, investigators once again turned their attention to the shortcut Miyako would take from work to her dorm. They returned to the area and interviewed nearby residents. One eyewitness provided a potential lead. On the night of October 26th, he saw a young woman getting into a small car on a narrow road. The car was white. Due to the dim streetlights, he couldn't see the girl's face clearly. Based on this, police suspected that Miyako had likely gotten into the white car and was then taken to a secluded location. But with so few actionable clues, they were still unable to track down the killer. As the investigation dragged on without results, media interest in the case only intensified. NHK television covered the story multiple times. One time, their reporters filmed at the site where parts of the victim's remains had been found and aired the footage on TV. Many viewers claimed that while watching the report, they heard a faint female voice in the background. The voice was so quiet that the words were unclear, but some audio analysis suggested it sounded like, "It hurts. Why me?" This eerie detail added a chilling, almost supernatural air to the case, and some people even began linking it to paranormal phenomena. The rumor mill churned, and public attention only grew. Months passed, yet the investigation made no new progress. The Japanese media and public continued to closely follow the case, placing unprecedented pressure on the police. On January 20, 2010, the Commissioner General of the National Police Agency of Japan stood before Miyako Hiroka's memorial portrait and vowed to solve the case as soon as possible. Yet, even with the highest-ranking officer in Japan issuing the order, the case remained unsolved. The police racked their brains, deployed massive resources, over 300,000 officer deployments in total, and appealed to the public for any information that could help. They even offered a reward of 3 million yen. But all of it proved fruitless. It wasn't until 7 years later, in 2016, that the case was finally solved. In 2016, the case finally saw a breakthrough. While reviewing past criminal records, police came across a man named Tomi Yano. He lived in a neighboring prefecture to Shermaine and had a prior conviction for assaulting a woman with a knife. This drew investigators' attention, and they began digging into his background, uncovering far more than they expected. Tomi Yano was born in 1976 and lived in Yamaguchi Prefecture, which borders Shermaine. He grew up in Shimonoseki, Yamaguchi. His father owned a rice shop, and his mother worked as a laundress. He also had a younger brother. Yano was considered handsome and academically capable, the pride of his parents. But for reasons unknown, he suddenly dropped out of university and returned to his hometown. In October 2004, Yano was arrested in the Tokyo area for threatening and injuring a woman with a knife. He was sentenced to 3 years and 6 months in prison, and was released in May 2009. After his release, he worked as a salesman for a solar energy company in his hometown, achieving strong sales results. However, as police dug deeper into his activities, serious suspicions arose. Investigators discovered that on the night of October 26, 2009, and into the early hours of the next day, Yano had been driving near Mount Wulong. On November 6, 2009, the very day Miyako Hiroka's remains were first discovered there, Yano, who had never once taken a day off from work, suddenly requested 2 days of leave. This raised police suspicions to the highest level. They searched Yano's home and found his camera and a USB storage device in his brother's possession. Forensic technicians recovered deleted files from the devices, uncovering 57 photographs. After removing duplicates, there were about 40 unique images. The person in those photos was none other than Miyako. The photos showed her bound and lying in the bathroom of Tomi Yano's home, with ligature marks around her neck. One image even captured Yano's foot. These images became the key evidence in the case. Police were certain Yano was the killer. However, because the photographs were so disturbing, they were never released to the public. What investigators in the Miyako Hiroka case did not expect was that Tomi Yano had already died in an accident 7 years earlier, one of the eeriest aspects of the case. On November 8, 2009, while all available officers were conducting a full-scale search at the foot of Mount Wulong, police recovered the limbless torso of Miyako Hiroka. That same day, not far from Mount Wulong, a bizarre car fire occurred on a nearby highway. Witnesses said a white sedan repeatedly scraped against the guardrail. Smoke began to pour from under the hood, and moments later, the entire car was engulfed in flames. When responding officers arrived, they found only 2 charred bodies inside. Those remains were identified as Tomi Yano and his mother. Investigators found no skid marks or signs of braking at the scene. Weather conditions were good that day, and visibility along that stretch of road was clear. Because most police resources and public attention were focused on the Hiroka case at the time, the traffic accident quickly faded from notice. With both victim and perpetrator deceased, many details of the case could no longer be verified. Finally, on December 20, 2016, police announced that the Miyako Hiroka case had been solved. They stated there was sufficient evidence to prove that the killer was none other than Tomi Yano, who had died in the car fire 7 years earlier. Since Yano was already dead, the local public prosecutor's office declared there would be no indictment. What remains unsettling is the fact that Yano died in a car crash so soon after murdering Miyako Hiroka. The cause of the accident is still unknown. Some believe it was a tragic coincidence, others think he took his mother with him in a murder-suicide out of guilt, and still others say it was Miyako's spirit seeking revenge. In any case, the true killer was finally identified. As the saying goes, those who do evil will meet their own ruin. Yano got what he deserved. But the loss of Miyako Hiroka is heartbreaking. Her life, full of promise at just 19, was cut short before it had truly begun. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this case, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow Case Diaries. There are plenty more cases coming your way. Got thoughts on today's story? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. See you in the next one.